Record on this computer. Hello, everyone. It is Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. It's about 11:33 a.m. on the Pacific Coast, and this is the Language Workstream of the Inclusive Naming Initiative's bi-weekly sync. Per Carson's suggestion, um, we looked for a better time and we found a better time. So this, barring any major failures, will be our regular bi-weekly slot. Thank you, Carla, and yes, thank you, Carson, for catching the dangerous highlighting error in the notes. FYI, I'll paste it one more time since we've officially started. Meeting notes are open for editing because we are now in this meeting. They are generally closed for editing otherwise to prevent harassment. Okay, so if you are kind of participating in this working group, I need to add you manually to our mailing list, which is language or ws-language at inclusivenaming.org. It is a manual ad, not something you can automatically subscribe to. And again, this is kind of A, to prevent people from getting a ton of spam email, and B, to prevent kind of harassment. So I got almost everybody from last week, but there are a few people. If you scroll down in the notes, and I'll actually just share my screen for a minute. If you are in this meeting currently, and if your name is highlighted, I could not find your email, and therefore you have not been added. So if you could DM me on Slack, or otherwise get your email to me, I would avoid pasting it into this document because anybody off of the internet can see this document, so don't put your email in here. But yeah, if you can DM me on Slack, and please get me your emails, that would be helpful. If you are attending this meeting for the first time and you would like to be added to the Language Workstream's sub-mailing list, again, please email me or DM me on Slack. DM me on Slack, that's the best way. Okay, moving on. I'm actually gonna skip the project board review for a second, and I'm gonna bring up this in the reoccurring topics, which is this workstream needs a second chair. I'm currently the first chair of this, and to prevent me from overworking myself, and in case something happens to me and I have to take, say, a month off of work, we would like to be able to keep things going. So if you have a passion for language and you're looking to take a leadership role, please get in contact with me privately. I mean, you can also publicly volunteer, but I'm assuming private is maybe a bit more comfortable for people. Yeah. Cool. Yes, big agree, Carson. It would be great to see somebody who's not as involved in open source, just because in the current leadership team, we are probably overrepresented for open source people. And it would be good to start to balance those viewpoints. Okay. So aside from that, I'm going to share my screen again. If you look in the notes, you can find a link, but we now have a project board set up in inclusive naming. Once again, link is in the notes. You can also navigate to it from github.com/inclusive naming and just come over to projects. And again, this is kind of what we agreed on. We wanted to track things somehow via something. So what this meeting will probably end up being is like a high-level overview of this project board for now. we have a few things that were kind of there from the olden days, and then we have a few things that we decided on last meeting, which are gather initial recommendations from participating member companies and reconcile those was something we wanted to do. We wanted to revisit the evaluation framework now that we have a slightly larger team of people. We wanted to create documentation around what our principles were as a group. And actually on this note, very specifically, Carla, if I can ask you to take a look at, sorry, my navigation's all over the place today. If I can ask you to take a look at this one, because this was actually your suggestion last meeting, and I'll paste it in the chat for you. This was your suggestion, and I couldn't remember the exact details. At least I think it was your suggestion. And it would be good to flesh this out before we kind of throw it to people. And the last thing we need to do is kind of define the format that we want to give recommendations in. So those are the four things we decided to work on. And I think the real thing to do here is start forming task groups and start assigning people to these issues. So let's start from the top. Gather initial recommendations from participating member companies and reconcile. I'm going to assign myself to this one for sure because I want to send out the email. And I've got a question about that later. But is there anybody else who would like to be involved with receiving recommendations, trying to compile them into a spreadsheet is what I think we wanted to say, and then organizing this larger language group and figuring out exactly how we want to review and reconcile them. Is there anybody else who's interested?
Yeah, I'm really interested in that.
Cool.
I am too.
Sorry, who was I am too?
Joanna.
Okay. So I've got Carla, Joanna,
Larry.
Larry.
Okay, so you're writing this down, Celeste, so I
Yep,
don't need to.
I am.
Good. If
Monica?
Monica as well?
Alyssa Yell down for that too?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to comment there for now. And if it would be very, very helpful. See, Carson's a step ahead of me. If I can find him.
Yeah, I might not be in the overall group yet for org.
Yeah, you might not. I guess we're going to need to figure that one out, huh? So for the 3 or 4 people who just volunteered, A, thank you very much. You're lovely. B, if you have a GitHub account, please comment on this issue so that I know what your GitHub handle is or your username. If you do not have a GitHub account, please let me know and I will help you out with setting that up because you will need one to participate in like the issue-based discussions of this. Okay. Because we're all kind of in different companies and we can only meet once every couple of weeks for this, a lot of the work and the chatter on this and the questions are gonna probably happen in this GitHub issue. So again, please comment. And we will start brainstorming there and in Slack is what I'm gonna say. Okay. Next issue down. Revisiting the evaluation framework. So this is this document here. a framework for evaluating harmful language. And actually, I'll just edit the issue description. And it defines kind of a set of how to look at a term and like what questions to ask about it to determine if it might in fact be harmful or better replaced. It is very much the work of a small person like me plus a few other opinions. So now that we have a larger group, it would be a good idea to revisit this. And once again, asking for volunteers. Who's interested?
I'd participate in that. That sounds interesting.
Okay.
Me too.
Carla.
Joanna, too.
Monica too.
Karsten too, thanks.
Awesome. And I mean, it's kind of my original draft, so like I'm there in brackets. But I'm also trying really hard not to overcommit. And I also make the same suggestion to everyone here is be wary of how much you're committing to. Cool. Same request, everybody. Please comment on this issue so that I know your GitHub username and can continue to assign you things. Next one down, which is the principles documentation. Again, I think I really want to say this was Carla. It might have been Monica in the last meeting who talked about this. Do either of you
It wasn't
remember?
me.
Oh,
It
no,
wasn't
I'm
me.
sorry.
I was really interested in the previous one.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I don't mind at all. No, I like the language. I'm not as interested in the principles.
Fair enough.
I don't know, Celeste, you're bringing my name up and maybe I can switch to this instead. What do you?
Yeah. Here's my problem is when I was putting this together, I couldn't remember. And maybe if I can't remember and the person who brought this to the group is not here, I'm going to say let's give it a few weeks and see if anybody emerges. And if not, then maybe let's just close it and say we tried and we can't remember.
Yeah, when I said I was interested in this, I think I was thinking of something like the framework.
That's totally fair. Okay, and maybe that's just what it is they're combined.
Mhm.
I'm going to say let's leave this for now.
I was going to say we could probably, I mean, we have principles that are guiding some of our work at F5, so I can share that in the other docs, and maybe that would be pulled into something like this.
Yeah,
We'll have shared principles that we can reuse, repurpose.
Yeah. It does seem potentially redundant, so maybe putting kind of principal kind of information in the other doc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually need this.
Yeah.
Last, it was me who was talking about this because we have put together a couple of principles. Hainu, who's also on this call, she and I at IBM have put together principles around the use of black and white terms and master and slave terms, just to try to lay out for people what the issues are. So I can provide those.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. And I actually, my initial, my hot take sitting here on a call and forming an opinion is that sounds useful separate of the framework to me, because that's like, it's just further illustration of like, here is why these are things. Yeah, so I think that, I'm just going to put a comment there. And this time I'm going to remember to flesh out that issue. Thank you so much, Carla.
Hi, this is Hainu. I haven't had a chance to join before, so nice to see everybody. And Carla and I are partners in crime on this at IBM. And I would add the principles have been really helpful too for deciding what terms not to change. So it's really been, something that we focus a lot on, trying to define and really clarify for ourselves, so that we can explain it to others, like explain our reasoning, but also to make decisions.
Agreed. They're helpful.
Of these terms and why do you change them? Use them as a baseline for not making changes. Okay. Perfect. So really, I think because this is going to come, it sounds like straight from IBM, what I think the action item here is, and I think it's both for Carla and Hainu, nice to meet you, by the way, is working on being allowed to publish that publicly, and potentially publish it on the inclusive naming website as opposed to keeping it internal.
That's the plan. I'm actually meeting with Dale right after this call to
Oh,
work on the
wonderful.
content that we want to provide.
Okay.
We might have something similar to Intel that we could probably help out with. Maybe let's join ideas as well.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Again, it's a matter of like, how do we start to allow it to live publicly?
This might be kind of like the word lists where, we also need to reconcile the subtle differences. My guess is that we'll all find we're doing things relatively similarly, but we're using different words or having different things we come about it. So some kind of merging together of different principle framework approach things towards something. I don't know. In terms of how to do it publicly, what we could do is everybody could, when they come with content that they're prepared to dump into the public discussion. So it's been pre-vetted to be put into the public space for discussion. And then we do all of that merging and decision-making transparently. So people can see the source material that we're working from and how we got to the final framework principles, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so here's what I'm also understanding from the discussion. One is that this is going to have a similar intake process to the recommendations themselves. Two is it's going to have a similar reconciliation process of like everybody saying similar things. Now, what's the conclusive thing that we can say? And three, this is where it's going to get interesting and we're going to have to coordinate, is I have a feeling there's probably quite a bit of overlap between this principles or explanatory type of document versus the framework itself. I think, so we're going to have to figure out how to tease those apart in a way that makes sense. Okay. So last one I want to talk about today, just so that we have time to like get to everything else, is define the format for a single recommendation. So you have like one term to one replacement or one term to many replacements contextually. And this is my like very, very quickly put together before KubeCon last quarter current format. It's effectively, think about this in terms of like what form field would we want to fill in. Sorry, now I've got too many tabs. There we go. So I'm gonna self-assign to this one as well, because there was a marketing aspect to this as well that we've talked about previously, but may be difficult to pull off in practice, which is effectively in this recommendation format. There is the possibility to say, for example, if your project has replaced master slave, record underneath this recommendation, like project X has replaced master slave, company Y has replaced master slave, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that would be very interesting because I think something that this initiative tends to struggle with is reaching critical mass and seeing that other people are doing it as well. But potentially present some like interesting legal situations down the road. So I'm going to self-assign to that. To me, this is actually a pretty quick task, but I would love other opinions. So if anybody else would like to come along for the party. Garson.
I'd be happy to. That's Meg.
Meg, nice to see you again.
Thanks.
Yeah, Monica.
Okay. Okay,
Anna volunteers.
thank you.
I see Julian is in the chat volunteering.
Thank you so much for moderating the chat for me.
Part of my job is note taker, I think.
Yeah, you know, that Zoom chat seems like a good idea until you start sharing your screen. Okay. I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, everybody. Once again, please comment on this issue so that I know what your GitHub handle is. The next steps for all of these, just FYI, is to start to break down the task a little bit. So if you have thoughts or ideas, or if a question comes to mind, what I would ask of you is to please leave a comment in GitHub with those thoughts, questions, and ideas, because we have to start talking about them now, so that we know what we're going to solve. And then after that, I think we start drafting, everybody. Okay. Any questions about the project board or about issues so far?
This is Monica. I have one question about
Yeah.
the scope of the language effort, because
Mhm.
I myself am kind of focused on technical documentation.
Mhm.
And you could argue that that's a limited scope, because there's some language that might appear in marketing or kind of other content that is highly unlikely to appear in the docs. So it's makes it a little workable. So I want to know if we feel like the scope here is, have we defined, are we still discussing that? Or do we feel like it's everything? We don't want to limit the scope.
I think that's
Just
a
kind of
great
curious about-
question. And I wonder if that's actually a question we need to talk about with the larger group. Because I have a similar question, specifically when I saw a province of China should be on the ban list and should be replaced with Taiwan in all scenarios, which is a very interesting language question. Perhaps not directly relevant to technical documentation and to code, and a very, very difficult piece of language to solve for.
It is. If you want to sell anything in China, it's a problem.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
For me, I look at this and I'm not entirely, that to me is out of my depths as a technical writer. Not entirely, but like pretty close. I err on this being about code and about technical documentation personally. I think there's room for like marketing language around software to be potentially a part of the scope tangentially, but I think that we should be somewhat focused on software because that's what our expertise is. That's what we can provide to the world and provide like a robust answer to, in my opinion.
Right.
I
Okay.
agree,
That's
Celeste. And not only that, but internationalization is a whole nother species of study, if you will,
Yeah.
way beyond what we're doing here. So I think, Celeste, you've got the right impulse there.
Yeah. And actually,
I think it might be a little bit broader than just software. I mean, since we do have a standards work stream, I'm thinking, it may be software standards and, technology more broadly. But I also don't think it's appropriate for, or furthering our mission to be taking sides in, various international political controversies. That's not the goal or mission of the
Yeah.
Inclusive Naming Initiative.
yeah. So I think that's I think though you're hitting on an interesting boundary that we need to define a little bit more, Joanna, which is like, what is the boundary of quote unquote software and technology? Like political issues are inside or outside of that. So I think if somebody could help me out and do this, can we start a Slack discussion on what the boundary of quote unquote language and software is or like software and technology, I think is the term that we're using, like what falls inside of that boundary, what falls outside of that boundary. And we can start with our friend province of China here on the ban list, because that'll kind of jog our memories.
Yeah, Celeste, there is the technology versus non-technology boundary, and I think there's also the what is actual inclusive communication.
Yeah.
And making taking a position on dispute between two countries, or whatever terms we want to use to describe them. That doesn't seem to further our mission about creating welcoming environments and being inclusive of individuals and groups regardless of identity. That seems like, that's not so much a technology versus non-technology issue, but it doesn't really seem that like it furthers our core mission and purpose.
Yeah. The other aspect of that question is, for example, if we pull up the male and female should be on the ban list question, one could argue that that's well outside the realm of technology, but as soon as you, for example, start talking about USB cables, you have male connectors and female connectors, and that language is embedded in technology again. So I think, I wonder if like what our delineation line here is, maybe, is there an existing example like in technology? I don't know how I feel about that now that I've said it out loud. Because for example, even with the province of China question, if you are a UX designer designing a drop down of where people live, all of a sudden the province of China question becomes very, very relevant to you.
That's I was going to use the exact same drop down.
Yeah.
I think it can get a little even more.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think it can get more confusing if we consider the male and female. It's male and female when used with connectors seems purely technological, but the querying for like whether you should query for gender and whether you only include male and female in the gender query of say a form that you're filling out does seem to be somewhat in the purview of what we're talking about here. So I don't have a solution, but it gets quite murky as if I try to find the border.
So this is interesting because I think it comes back to the recommendation format question a little bit. And just to note, we are over time. I can personally stick around for a few more minutes, but if you need to drop, please do not feel bad about doing so. Because I think it was Rich or somebody else, I forget whom, recommended adding a severity to a replacement term, which is, this is something you need to replace at once all the time versus this is something you should consider. And I wonder if there's also an aspect of this, which is if you are doing certain kinds of tasks, you're going to need to take a stance on that. And I almost wonder, again, if there's things that we can't necessarily make a recommendation on because they are too deeply tied to how a specific business is going to operate in the world. Again, like if you're a business that does a lot of business in China, like we can't say to be adherent to inclusive naming standards, you have to replace province of China with Taiwan. Like that would destroy your business. Okay.
If I think if you were the severity that we're talking about, that came from Rich Bowen. The part of that concept was sort of how we were the internal group of Red Hat was trying to think about. Part of what we ended up was also the conscious language wording. That's what I was trying to get to. Is that so that there's a degree to which the consciousness thinking about, is this the right word? Is this the one that gives you the most meaning? Like a lot of times that sort of solves a problem about what word to choose. You aren't in a problematic word area, and and the severities or something like that is another way of reflecting, like, you know, your situation, here's the context around this thing, so you can make a conscious decision around whether this is the right word or the wrong word to use in the situation, because there are a lot of situations that are not clear what the other choice is, you know.
Mhm.
And other ones where it's extremely clear, right?
Yeah, that's true. So we're at time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Does anybody have any last minute questions or things that they'd like to bring to the group before we drop? Sounds like resounding silence. Thank you all very much for your time. Once again, please comment on GitHub issues that you have volunteered for. You can find links to all of those GitHub issues via the project board, which is linked in the agenda. You can also DM me on Slack if you are confused and need help. The time has come to start teasing apart the questions of where our boundaries are. So I will look forward to speaking with you on GitHub, and we will see each other in a couple of weeks. Thank you all very much. Bye now.